Hello. Okay. So welcome to my channel. This is Harshiva Edu, and this is the iOS interview questions with Swift 4. And today we're going to talk about um, again, yeah, iOS interview questions with Swift. And this is the third part. So if you haven't seen the first and second part, please go ahead and watch those videos as well. I will leave links for those two videos in the description, and if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. If you like the videos, please do like as well. So let's jump right into it. So the first question we're going to talk about today is any versus any object. So what is any and what does any object mean? So as the name suggests, any object only deals with the class type, like which can have some object. So when you are using any object, when you're referring to something which has object, like person is a class over here, right? So for that you can use any object, whereas if you want to use any like for data types like string or boolean or integer, uh, so if you want to use for data types, then you should use any, and if you want to use for classes, then you should use any object. So any is nothing but it's a data type, which can be like it can be referred for multiple data types like string, boolean, or integers. So any object can only be used for class type, whereas any will be used with optional or functional type on all the data types like this types, string, integer, or boolean. So in this example, you can see any array. We have an any, and this array can hold integers, strings, and boolean, whereas my person is an any object and it holds person object, right? So yeah, any object will be can be used with class type, whereas any can be used with data types and function types and optional types. So yeah, second question is access specifier in Swift 4. So we have like 5 access specifier in Swift 4: open, public, internal, file private, and private. Um, Open and public, as the name suggests, it's very much public. When you create something with these access specifier, it means that you want your variable or class to be accessed throughout your module or can be used outside the module as well. So when you say public, it means that it can be subclassed and overridden within the defining module. Okay, but when you say open, it means even more open. It can be subclassed and overridden outside the defining module as well. So that is the only difference. Otherwise, when you say open or public, it means that you are making it public and anyone can use it, right? So yeah, so public means within the defining module, and open means even the outside of the defining module, it can be overridden or subclassed. Internal is the default access specifier, and it means that whatever variable or properties or functions or class, whatever you are referring with internal, means it can be used within in the module's entity only, nowhere else. It can be used in the module only. And yeah, so that is the default access specifier. If you don't specify any access specifier, it becomes internal, because it is the default one. And then file private and private. File private and private, totally opposite of public and open. It will make your access limited. So if you say anything, any classes or function as file private or private, it will have limited uh, access. It comes with a limited access of scope. So file private means, so the difference between these two is file private restrict the use of entity in the defining source, whereas private restrict the use of entity in its enclosing declaration. So file private, as the name suggests, file. So when you define anything with file private, it in the one page, like in that particular file, it will be accessible, whereas private, if you define it in the enclosing declaration, like inside the function, it will be used inside the function only. So in the enclosing declaration. It restrict the use in the enclosing declaration, and file private makes it available in the file only, in that particular file where you have defined it. So these are the access specifier, file access specifier in Swift 4, and internal is the default one. Open and public makes your class or functions or variables very much accessible, whereas file private and private make it with a limited access. Okay, generic. Generic is very useful actually, and it is being asked a lot in these days in the interviews for iOS. So you should know it. So generics makes it like with generic you can make reusable code. You can make reusable functions. So let's say, imagine you have one function which only accept string. It doesn't accept integer or anything, just a string. But if you want to make it generic, generic means making your function generic so that it can accept any data type. Like it can accept string, it can accept a boolean, it can accept integer, it can accept even some kind of object. So yeah, so making it generic means making your function generic for the different kind of data types, right? So for example, Swift's array and dictionary, they are both generic. So you can make dictionaries with the string or integer. So these are already generic. So if you're using arrays or dictionary, you're already using generics. So that's what we have written. You can create an array that holds int values, or an array that holds string values, or indeed an array for any other types that can be created in Swift. Similarly, you can create a dictionary to store values of any specified data types. This is what over here. So do nothing is a function. So this is how you define generic in this kind of structure. You say y x t. So by writing this, it says that over here this x and this t, x is like our normal function, right? So you just give a name to your parameter, and then t means it can have any kind of data type. So instead of t, if you don't make it generic, instead of t you will be writing string or int or bool, and then you will not have this generic thing over here. So if you want to make it generic, you will have to provide this kind of structure, and then this function like do nothing can accept anything. Like it can accept string, integer, and boolean, and you can do whatever you want to do with that. So that was generic. And then a core data stack. Okay, this is very important, very good question, and actually very good to know this when you're making an iOS application. Core data is the database. It's a database for our uh, iOS applications. Core data is like local database for your iOS application. It is not actually a database. It's an object map graph. It internally it creates the database in SQLite or some other persistent store. So let's see how the core data stack looks. So I'm very sure that you might know what core data is. As I explained just now, it is the database for your application. You can create local database using core data for your application. It's very simple to use and very, very much useful to know this core data structure. If you're an iOS developer, you should definitely know this. So most of the application do use it, and that's why it is very, very much popular in interview questions. So how does core data work, and how does the core data stack looks like? It's a very common question in interviews, and if you are at higher level like senior iOS developer or lead iOS developer, if you're going for those kind of interviews, you will probably be asked this question. So let's talk about it. So core data stack, it looks like this. I took this image from Apple documentation for core data. And this is how it looks like. And on the top of the stack we see manage object context. And what it represents, the manage object context represents a single database data record on the model. Okay, so NS manage object class or subclass uh, represents a single data record based on model. Uh, so this is and manage object context. What is manage object context? It will hold, it is a collection of manage objects. So I'll just say MOC, manage object context. So MOC is the one with which you will be able to perform all your CRUD operation, like create, create, read, update or delete. All those CRUD record operation, you will need MOC, manage object context. So manage object context is a workspace which contains many of the objects, like manage object. So in your application, you can create multiple manage objects. Okay, and you will have this manage object context to manage all those objects. So yes, so manage object context MOC is the one which will perform CRUD operation on for your application. So this is very important to understand. So to do anything related to core data, it's the most higher level of library we are talking about right now. To do any operation in core data, you need MOC, manage object context. And manage object context is a workspace which it's a collection of manage objects. As it's a collection of manage objects. And one manage object refers to a single data record in our model. So yeah. Okay, and then it is connected with persistent store coordinator, and persistent store coordinator is connected with manage object model. So let's talk about manage object model first. So what is manage object model? So this is where we create our tables actually. So the manage object model describes the data structure and relationship, and we define it using the data model editor in Xcode. So in Xcode, we can create. So I guess if I could just show you, let me just create a new Xcode project. Okay, and I will show you. I don't go in those type of details, but I want to go data test. Okay, and then let's go into that, create. So over here, if you select core data while creating the project, I don't know if you notice, I selected the core data while entering my project name. So then this XC data model class will be, the data model file will be created, and in this you will be able to add entity. So this is nothing but your data model. So this is what is this layer, manage object data model. Yeah, so you can basically create the an entire data model using this. So if I can, so over here, right, so you can, so this is your entity, and then you can create like different like username and password. We shouldn't, like PWD, I'll just say, and then user ID, then address. By the way, you should never store password. They just say it's user age something, and then you can select like which type of data uh, field it is. So it's like integer, then user ID, you want to make it integer, whatever. Address could be string. So this is one date, this is one entity, this is one table. You can create as many tables as you want. So this is, let's say, user, and this could be, sorry, this could be address. So as many entities you want. So this is actually, you're creating the model. So this is what we're talking about. This is the manage object data model. Okay, Yeah. So that's what. So, and this is gets saved as XC data model ID. So manage object data model is nothing but collection of entity description, and entity is nothing but our tables. So that's what I showed you. The entity was our table. Okay, and then this persistent store coordinator. So what do you mean by persistent store? Persistent store is our real database. So in iOS gives us multiple ways to have multiple different types of persistent store. So in core data, the native core data gives you three types of persistent store. You can either store it in binary, you can store it in XML, or you can store it as SQLite. So by default it's SQLite, and but you can make it binary or XML as well. So persistent store is actual database. Mostly in most of the cases will be SQLite, and you can have multiple collection of persistent store for different types of what for your complex projects. You can have different types, different persistent store, and though the and those persistent store, a collection of persistent store needs to be managed. So to needs to be managed, sorry, I'm babbling. So this is why we have persistent store coordinator. Persistent store coordinator is a mediator between manage object context, manage object model, and the real persistent store. Maybe there will be a collection of persistent store, right? So to coordinate between these we have persistent store coordinator. So this is how the core data store looks like. On top we have manage object context. So this is manage object. In most of the cases in a simple iOS application you will not be worried about all this, maybe not these, but you will have to create your entities. You have to create your model even for a very simple application. So in a simple application you will not have to worry about persistent store and how it is, which persistent store it's creating, it's SQLite, and how many create different persistent store. You'll just deal with the MOC, and with the help of MOC you will be able to perform a CRUD operation on your persistent store. And manage object model also you require, because you will have to create your tables and you have to create the relationship between those tables. And then what does persistent, as we talked about, persistent store coordinator does nothing but be coordinate between these MOC and we can call it MOM. And so as I talked, there are like multiple types of persistent store you can create in core data. Also, I do wanted to say that Xcode provides you capability to create those so manage object classes. So you can, after creating your model, right, you can just so I'll just show you in this class. So let's say for user class you want to create the manage object context. So all you have to do is generate code gen, select manually, and go to product and create NS managed object class subclasses. And once you click that, it will ask you for which entity you want to create. Over here you can select for both. So let's just select for both, and then next, where do you want to store it, and then create. Somehow, I don't know, it's a bug, it just gets created out of the project, so you have to just pull it over here. Yeah, so as you can see, whatever you had over there, it creates the subclass of manage object context over here, manage object context. And this is the class where you can do whatever uh, helper methods you want to write for CRUD operations. And this properties class is an extension of this class, and this is basically managed by our Xcode. So anytime you add more fields in your entity, this class should be updated. Like let's say you add a user city and user street, so this class needs to be updated. So you can either update it manually, or you can just delete this class and do the same process again, and it will be created again. Sorry, yeah, go to editor, and when you select that, it will show you that option. So these two class is created by Xcode for you. You don't even have to create it, and then just use it. Write your helper method in this class and then start using it in your application to perform save, delete, and whatever operation you want to perform. So that's what is written over here. And then with CodeData stack with NS manage object, as you understand, MOC, with the help of MOC, how do you add and fetch data? It's very simple. You have to create an entity description. When you say entity, it means that table name. So put your entity name, your manage object context, like in which context you want to store your entity, from which context you are storing, referring your entity to, and then um, like create a reference to your object, like one particular record. So it will take entity object and then again manage object context reference, and then you can just set value. And so with this you are setting value for that particular ID. So this is the field name and this is the value of that. And then once after this you will just have to call your manage object context car manage object context reference, and then uh, save it. So there is a function called save and manage object context, and you can just save it. I haven't shown it here. It's very simple. You can get it from any CodeData YouTube tutorial. Okay, for fetch you have to call NSFETCHEDRESULTSCONTROLLER and provide your entity name, and based on this reference variable, you will be able to execute a fetch request on. So with the help of MOC, you will be able to execute this fetch request, and you will get your result, and you can look through your results. So this is very simple code. So for fetching, you need to use NSFETCHEDRESULTSCONTROLLER, as simple as that. For saving, for adding records in your table, you have to create an entity description, and then you have to create an instance of the record. Because you're saving a record, so you have to create an instance of the record by using the entity name and a manage object context, and then save it, like set value and then save it. So add data and fetch data, these two things are very common for CodeData. This is what you'll be doing. Even update is very simple. You just have to, instead of the same thing, you just overwrite on the existing uh, existing record, not adding the new record. So yeah. So with CodeData, there is a new thing which has come up. It's called NSFetch result controller. This is so the question which is being asked a lot in these days in interviews is why to use NSFetch result controller. So NSFetch result controller is mostly used with table and collection views, table views and collection views. The purpose of NSFetch request is to keep updating our records. So a fetch result controller manages the result of a fetch request, and it notifies its delegate about any changes that affect the results of that fetch request. So NS fetch controller fetch result controller comes with a delegate methods, and anytime there is any update in the result, it notifies the delegate and you can update in your table. So it's very good for table view and collection views, and it offers the ability to use in memory cache to improve the performance. So if you're dealing with table views and collection views and you want to use core data, then you should probably use NSFETCH results controller to improve performance. So yeah. So what is NSFETCH result controller? It is used with table view and collection views to improve performance, and with the delegates of these this controller, we can effectively update the result in our table views and collection views. Okay, protocol oriented programming. So why is Swift protocol oriented programming is the question, and it is very important question. Either you are a beginner in iOS, not very much beginner, like if you have 2-3 years of experience, or you have 4-5 years of experience, this question is being asked a lot because Swift is a protocol oriented programming, and you should understand why it is a protocol oriented programming and not object oriented programming. So why Apple made Swift a protocol oriented programming? Because they saw some drawbacks in protocol oriented object oriented programming. So the problem was object oriented programming has inheritance, and with a very complex hierarchy of inheritance, the bottom class end up with unnecessary state to hold. Like, it has a lot of data which it doesn't require. So let's say class A extend from class B, class B extend from class C extend from class D. Then the hierarchy creates, due to the hierarchy, the most lowest class ends up having a lot of data which it doesn't even require. So that is it creates a complicated hierarchy, and the end result is not even required. So that's what is the problem. And then also, object oriented programming is mostly reference type. So it uses classes which is reference type, and reference type may cause code unsafe. So for example, processing collection of reference types while they are being modified. So the drawback with object-oriented programming is it uses reference type, which can lead to performance issues. And another major problem is inheritance, which would be which through which you end up having a lot of code which you don't even require. Like, your bottom class from the inheritance hierarchy will have a lot of unnecessary data, unnecessary not data, like unnecessary information or objects which it doesn't even require. So that's not required, right? So to to avoid those things, we have Swift has come up with protocol oriented programming, and it says that protocol oriented programming, uh, with protocol oriented programming, you just have to conform to protocols, uh, you know and unlike classes, you can implement multiple protocols. And you can even use protocols with structures and enumerations, which is really cool. And then it has protocol extensions. So the main feature of protocol oriented programming is with protocols you can have extension to those protocol, and then you can write common functionalities, and which will functionality in that extension, which will be confirmed by all the classes which will inherit your protocol. So yeah. And protocol oriented programming prefers to use value type instead of reference type, so it does save you this reference type problem as well. So yeah, so protocol oriented programming, you can conform to multiple protocols. You can write, you can have a protocol extension for structures and enumerations, and you can write extension to protocol which will give you common functionality throughout multiple classes. Like, wherever you will use protocol, you will be wherever you are implementing protocol, you will conform to these common functionality which you might be writing in the protocol extension. So that's protocol oriented programming and why it is very important. Okay, KVC and KVO. KVC, so KVC stands for key value coding, It's very simple actually. You just have to enter your key and it will return the value. That's what is KVC, right? So here is the example. Let Robert last name self value for key last name. So our dictionary use KVCs, right? You can, yeah, object for key, right? So that is actually a KVC. So based on key you get the value, and that's KVC, key value coding. You will be like, based on the value key you will get the value. So it's like a mapping. KVO is very interesting. This stands for key value observing. It means that for you can, so let's just read it. KVO allows a controller or class to observe changes to a property value. In KVO, an object can ask to be notified of any changes to a specific property. Whenever that property changes value, the observer is automatically notified. So it's like, if you know observer pattern, this is exactly the same thing. So let's say your property is, what you can do is you can ask your property to be, you can set an observer to your property so that every time any changes in that property you will be notified. So yeah, if you know observer pattern, you understand what it means. So basically you can observe any changes to a property and get notified if there is any changes happening to your property. So this can only be you can use only KVO only for dynamic properties, letters, which has subclass of NS object, which are subclass of NS object. So KVO, let's say, so over here I have written @objc objective C. It means that this is a dynamic class. So class NS object, which is conforming to NS objects, and in that I have written a dynamic object, dynamic property, sorry, var name Taylor Swift. So on this I can perform KVO because it's a dynamic object, dynamic property. And I can write like this, that Taylor dot observe person dot name dot options new or old. You have two options, new or old, and then person change. And so this code will be called every time there is a change in this name. So every time the name is being changed to something, this code will be called, I am called person.name. So it will tell you the what is the new name of the person, because dot new, right? If you want to check if you said dot old, then on change of this particular property you will get Taylor Swift only over here, and the new name would be overridden with the name for name. So even though the name is changed, you will get old name because you have written options dot old. If you write options dot new, what we have done over here, then whatever changed name is provided to name, it will be written, like you will get that in this uh, block of code. So yeah, so KVO means you can observe any changes being done on a particular property. Yes. Okay. Content hugging and compression resistance. Okay. So so this is very important when you are designing your your UI, and like very complex UI, then you will have to use it. So in storyboard we have options like you can change the content hugging and compression resistance. So what does it mean exactly? So hugging means, it's very interesting actually. Hugging means content does not want to grow. So in this image, I got this image from Stack Overflow actually. So content hugging means it says that, oh, I don't want you to grow, so I will never let you go, please don't grow. So it's like, as the name suggests, right, hugging. You are hugging someone very tightly, that you don't want it to grow or to go, right? You don't want them to go, so you're hugging them. So when you say, when you increase the value of hugging, it means that your content will never go. It will be chodu. Sorry, small. I just use the Hindi word chodu. Yeah. So content hugging means you are hugging the your element and you don't want it to grow. And compression resistance means just opposite of content hugging means you don't want it to shrink. So it's like standing in the middle of the box and the box is trying to shrink and you're no, I'm not gonna let you shrink, just stay the way you are. Okay, so if you have a higher number for content resistance, then it will not shrink. Okay, it will not shrink, it will just resist it from shrinking. So here's a small example. So let's say a button, and you have this much space, and then you set the content hugging property to 500. So it means that you're saying that you don't want it to grow, so that's why it will become like click me and all the spaces will go away. When you say content hugging property to low, then it will stay the same and you'll have the space. Whereas content compression, if it is high, then it'll be like this. It will not shrink, whereas if when it is low, then it will shrink. So high means it wouldn't shrink, it will not allow these you know it will not allow this click me to shrink and cut off, whereas if it is low, the click me will cut off. So that's what. Okay, push notification, a very very important topic, and you will be asked for sure this. Some people ask it. I had been asked a lot of time. So they'll ask you, can you explain how push notification work and what is the process, how does it go? So here it is. So let's say this is your app inside a mobile, and you want you want your application to receive push notifications. So how would you do it? So the steps is, first step is you have to register for the push notification. So the app will register to the push notification in the device. This is the device, okay? So the app will ask your device, hey, I want push notification in my app, so please register for push notification. Device will say, okay. Then it sends the request to APNS server. APNS server is Apple Push Notification Server. It will take the request from the device and then it will reply to your device with the device token. So once the device has the device token, which is the third step, in the fourth step, it sends the device token to your app. Now the app has device token. Now in fifth step, this app sends the device token to the server. Okay, so the push notification, you have to send the push notification from somewhere, right? So you will have to write some kind of code at your server at your server side, um, which will take uh, which will create your message. So push notification is nothing but some message coming to your application saying that, hey, update your this thing, or we have some new exciting offers. So the message needs to come from somewhere. So it comes from a server which is from you or hosted on some cloud. So the server will receive the device token from the application, and this server should always have a P12 file. P12 file can be downloaded from your Apple development account, and the P12 file is actually called APNS certificate. Okay, so it is for a secure communication with your APNS server. So if your server does not have a P12 file, it will not be able to communicate with APNS server. Okay, so in order to send valid push notification, you need to have P12 file. In order to send push notification, you have got to have P12 file at your server. Okay, so you will have the P12 file at your server, and once you receive the device token from your app, you will send a request. You will send the push notification actually to the APNS server, and the push notification sent from your server would be in the form of payload. It's called payload. So server sends notification, payload with device token to APNS. I have just written toke. I'm so sorry. It should be token to APNS server. Okay. So server sends the notification payload with device token to APNS server, and once the APNS server has the message in payload, it sends the notification to the device. Okay. It's simple but long process, but it's very simple once you understand it. So your app will register for push notification. It will send a request to your device that I want to register for a push notification. The device send a request to APNS server uh, for a device token. APNS server replies with device token, and then it sends the device token back to your application. Then your application sends the device token to your server. Your server must have PTEL file to confirm the device token and send the payload to the APNS server, the push notification payload to the APNS server. And once the APNS server receives a payload, it sends the notification to the device. As simple as it is. So I am planning to make a video on remote push notification. So I will cover all this. I will show you how to do this in detail as well. So yeah, please do subscribe and watch. If you want me to create a remote push notification video, let me know and I'll definitely create it. I'm planning to create it and I'll definitely create it in like in near future. You might see it soon. Okay, this is some step. This is a checklist for APNS server. So I have made two checklists. One is checklist for APNS server, what all you have to do, and then one for code. So create an app ID and allowed with push notification. So when you're creating an app ID in your Apple Developer Store, you have to make sure that you click that little push notification button as well, and then create an SSL certificate with valid certificate and app ID, and then create provisioning profile with same certificate, and make sure to add device in case of sandboxing like development provisioning. Note that we will be good if we create provisioning profile after SSL certificate. So as I said, right, you have to create I'm sure you're very much aware about provisioning profile. So to run your application on your mobile phone, you need, even to test your application in your mobile phone, you need a development provisioning profile. So make sure that you're creating your provisioning profile with with the push notification enabled app ID, and you create your SSL certificate also with that enabled push notification app ID, and then create the provisioning profile. So just follow this pattern because it might create some problem if you don't, or you can just correct it, you can just delete. I mean, if it is in your hand, you can do whatever you want. But yeah, you need a certificate ID, an app ID, and provisioning profile. You need a certificate, you need an app ID with push notification enabled, and you need a provisioning profile with that certificate and app ID which is enabled with push notification. So that's why you will be creating, that's why I've written that you make sure that you create the provisioning profile after creating the certificate which is enabled with push notification. So just follow this pattern. Yeah, and with code you have to register for the push notifications. So to do that you have UI application dot share dot register for remote notification function, and then after registering you have to handle so as I showed over here, once you register, Apple sends you device token. So to handle the device token you have two methods. One is did register for remote notification with device token, and one is did fail to register for remote notification with error. So one is called when you are successful, one is called when you're successful and you have received the device token, and one is called when you fail to register for remote notification and there's some error. So these two to get the remote notification, to get the token, sorry. And then make sure that remote notification is enabled in your set target capability, background modes, remote notification. You have to enable that. And you have did receive remote notification. So there is one function called did receive remote notification. In this function, you'll be receiving your notification, and then you have to show it in your in your for your application as a notification. So this is the function where you will be actually receiving the notification. And these are the two YouTube videos I found very much helpful while understanding the push notification, remote notification. So you can watch those YouTube videos as well. Okay, next question is singleton. So it's very useful, like so it's one of the design pattern. I have explained this in one of my other videos as well, which is basically all the design patterns which we use for Swift. So this is so singleton is a design pattern. When do we use it? So when you want to make sure that you have only one instance of a class, then you go for singleton pattern. So there are times that you want to make sure that only one instance of a class is instantiated and that your application only uses that instance, then you should go for singleton. So that's the primary and only goal of singleton pattern. Singleton object can be accessed globally. So yeah, so it's like singleton, when you say I'm going ahead with singleton pattern, means that you will be making a shared instance of your class, and it will have only you it will so your class can have only one instance, and that shared global instance can be used throughout your application, and it cannot be rewritten. Like you cannot create multiple instances of that class. So if you have worked with Apple frameworks URL session and user default, then you are already using singleton pattern. So these URL session and user defaults, these are singleton classes, and it has shared instances, and through those shared instances you can you can call any functionality of these classes. So how do you create a singleton class? This is how you create a singleton class. Class location manager. You have to create a static shared variable. This is the variable through which you will be accessing this any of the function of this class. This is just some other variable, and then you have to write a private init function. So this is the function which makes sure that your class is not being overridden. You can never create a new instance of the class, so you have to create a private init. If you create a public init, then it can be, you can your class, there could be a multiple instance of your class. But when you see private init, it made sure that okay, only one instance of this class is created, which is this shared instance. And then you can write any function like this, and this function can be accessed like this, like location manager dot shared, which is this shared and only instance. And then you can call the function of this class, any function. You can have multiple functions, and all of those will be called like this. So this class have only one instance, which is shared instance, and which can be used throughout your application. And how do you make it, how do you make sure that it is only one instance? By writing this private initializer. Okay. We talked about singleton. Then why are we, if it is bad, why are we even talking about it, right? I know. So singleton is actually bad, guys. I mean, we use it a lot. Even I love it. Like, it's very simple to use and it's very convenient, but it's actually bad. It's like it makes your code very tightly coupled, which you do not want. So what happens is, singleton pattern, uh, the true reason for adopting the singleton pattern is global access, which makes us the developers life very easy, that you can just use it anywhere in your project and just call the function of that class and you're done with it, right? It's very convenient, but the convenience comes with a price. Sorry. So with singleton pattern, the problem is there is no transparency. So that's the major problem actually. With no transparency, there will be multiple bugs, and you will not be able to resolve those bugs. Testings become very difficult. So yeah, so the convenience comes at the cost of transparency. So by using singleton, you almost always sacrifice transparency for convenience. Since singletons are so convenient and easy to access, using them extensively usually leads to very hard to maintain spaghetti code, and that doesn't have clear separation between objects. So this is one of the drawback, that it provides very convenience code for us the developers, but it's not at all transparent, and testing becomes very difficult, and there could be error bugs anywhere, like they are global mutable shared states. So the state is automatically shared across the entire app, and bugs can often start occurring when that state changes unexpectedly. So the global access is the biggest problem over here. And because singleton is what is the last one, managing their life cycle can be very tricky, since singletons are alive during the entire lifespan of your application. Managing them can be really hard, and they usually have to rely on track options to keep track of the values. So yeah, so I mean, the most difficulty with singleton is the most valuable reason why we use it. So the reason why we use it for global access, but the problem is that global access creates the problem itself. So if you're using it, you have to be very sure when to use it, and try to use it very less in your code. And yeah, that's all. Like, don't overuse it. So the drawback of singleton is where it comes the dependency injection. So the cure to solve singleton disease is dependency injection. While a key advantage of singleton pattern is convenience, the most important advantage of dependency injection is transparency. Transparency is good. So why can't we use singleton throughout the application? Because it's not transparent. You don't know which object it is talking to which object. It's just very difficult how the data is flowing through your application. And that is why we use dependency injection. Instead of singleton, you should always use dependency injection in your application, so that when you write a class, you should know that this class, let's say our network class, it has user, and user is a different class. So the network class is dependent on user class, right? So we know that how the data is being passed between these two classes. Like, how are we getting the first name or last name? If I use first name and last name, I know that it is being called from user class, and this is the user class. So dependency injection means you are injecting the dependency into another class. If an object requires a valid user object to do its job, then their user object should be injected as a dependency. So it's a very small example. So yeah, so this would be easier. If there is any bug, it would be easier to resolve those bugs. Testing would be easier, and there will be more transparency in how the data is flowing. It would be easier to understand. So dependency injection is much better than singleton. So yeah, this is what is the dependency injection. Okay. Oh, we came to last question. So what is ABI? ABIs are like, so our Swift, right now it is not ABI compatible. So what happens is, if you add third-party library to your application, and let's say over the night your Xcode is being updated, and the next day your the version of Swift which you used is now updated version, right? So the third-party library which you added was referring to the old version of the Swift. Now your Swift version has changed, then your third-party library will not work. So that's why right now Swift is not ABI stable, and anytime there is a update in Swift version, you will have to update your third-party library manually, and get it working for your latest version of your Swift. So yeah, later, I mean, this is like maybe with Swift 5 we will have ABI stability, but right now it is not there. So yeah. Okay, that's all the question we had to cover. We talked about any versus any object. Let's do a short recap. Any versus any object. Any is for data types like string, integer, and bool. Any object is for class type. X is specifier. We have open, public, internal, file private, and private. Internal is the default one. Open public is like open to modules. Public is like uh, within the module, and open is outside the module also. You can subclass override it. File private is for a limited access scope. File means it can be used within the file. Private means it can be used within the enclosing declaration. Generics do you make your functions more reusable, like you can have your function accept multiple data types while writing like this kind of code. Then core data stack, very important question. You have manage object context, then you have persistent store coordinator to coordinate between the manage object context and manage object model. Manage object model is the entities nothing but tables, data structure like data relationship between your different tables. Manage object context is the one which you use to do your CRUD operations, and persistent store is your basic database, which could be binary XML or SQLite. Then you can perform add data or fetch data operations by using these functions. Yeah, NS fetch request, or you can use NS entity description, NS manage object. By creating these, you can add an object in your core data stack, like core data database, sorry. And then NS fetch result controller, you can use it with table views and collection views to effectively fetch records and update your table views and collection views for good performance. Then protocol oriented programming. Swift is protocol oriented programming, and you can a class can conform to multiple protocols. Even a structure and enums can conform to protocols, and you can write protocol extension which gives common functionality to all the classes which conforms to protocol. And then it is protocol oriented protocols are value type instead of reference type. And then KVC and KVO. KVC, key value coding, means you can just give the key and get the value. KVO means key value observing, like you can observe your property, and if it changes you will be notified, like this over here, right? And then content hugging and content resistant. Content hugging means I do not want you to grow, and content resistance means please do not shrink, please. So this is used in storyboards. Then push notification. This is the whole process, how it works. The app sends push registration request to device. Device sends it to APNS server. APNS server replies with device token. The device sends the device token to the app. App sends the device token to the server. Server should have the P12 file. Then server sends the notification payload with the device token to the APNS server, and then APNS server sends the notification to the device. Cool. Then push notification checklist. You should create the app ID with push notification enabled. Then you should create the SSL certificate with the valid certificate and app ID. And then you should create your provisioning profile with the SSL certificate, with the valid SSL certificate, right? And the app ID, the enabled app ID with push notification. And For code, you will be using register for remote notification method in UI application to register for push notification, and then you handle it with these two functions: did register remote notification with device token, and did fail register for remote notifications with error. And then you have to make sure that your remote notification in set target capability background modes is enabled, and then you will handle your remote notification in did receive remote notification function. Singleton, if you want to make sure that your class is, you have only one instance of your class, uh, there can only be one instance of your class, then you should create it with using Singleton pattern, and it will be globally accessed and you can use it throughout your application. And then singletons are good, but it's bad as well. So if you overuse it, it's bad because it does not provide any transparency, and you can end up having a code which does not have any clear transparency and how the data is flowing, and from where you are getting the bugs, it will be really difficult. So yeah, so to avoid singleton, you should always go with dependency injection, and you should know that which class is dependent on which other class, and how the objects are communicating with each other, and how the dependency, like how one class is dependent on another class. The same thing which I said it again. So you should make sure that you're using dependency injection more than singleton pattern. And then the last one, ABI. Right now, Swift is not ABI stable. The ABI stability is, might come with Swift 5, but right now it's not there. So in your current Xcode applications, in your iOS application, if you are adding a third-party library, and if you update your Swift version, or if you update your Xcode and Swift version is updated, then you will have to manually go and update your third-party libraries as well to work with your current Swift version. So these were all the questions we talked about today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please subscribe, and I will keep making these videos so that it's helpful for your interviews, and it's helpful for me as well. So thank you so much. Bye bye. Thank you. Where is the exit button?